Hey guys, tonight we're going to embark on a very different kind of journey. One that unfolds not on a stormy sea or across a dusty desert, but within the quiet confines of your own imagination. Imagine, if you will, the gentle crackle of an ancient fire, perhaps the rustle of papyrus, or the soft scratching of a stylus on a clay tablet. You're there, huddled close, as the very first lines are drawn, attempting to capture the vast, unknowable world. It's a pursuit as old as humanity itself, this urge to chart, to delineate, to make sense of what lies beyond the next hill, or indeed, what lies beyond the known horizon. We're talking about maps, of course, but not the crisp, multicolored charts you use on your phone today. Oh no, these are the maps that sprang from whispers and shared memories, from the very earliest attempts to put a mental picture of the world onto a physical surface. And here, as your delightful reality check, you probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes trying to navigate by one of these earliest, shall we say, minimalist maps. No GPS, no street names, just a few squiggles and a prayer. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always fascinating to see how far these sleepy stories travel. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Our story begins not with a grand explorer or a famous conqueror, but with the quiet, everyday human need to understand their surroundings. Think about it. Before we had satellite imagery or even compasses, how did anyone know where they were going? Early humans, nomadic by necessity, relied on an incredible internal mapping system. They carried entire landscapes in their minds, passed down through generations around the flickering firelight. You can almost feel the smooth stone tool in your hand, carving lines into a cave wall, perhaps depicting a successful hunting ground, or the winding path of a river. These weren't maps in the modern sense, but they were the embryonic forms of cartography's spatial representations designed to convey vital information. Now, when we think of these early maps, we often picture a lone hunter-gatherer, perhaps a burly chieftain, sketching out territories. But let's gently challenge that narrative. Who was gathering the herbs, remembering the safest routes to water sources, or knowing which berry patch was ripe at which time of year? Often, it was women. Women were the primary gatherers, often traveling extensively within their immediate territories, building an intimate knowledge of the land, its resources, and its dangers. They were the original local guides, possessing an encyclopedic knowledge of their environment. While direct archaeological evidence of female-created maps from this earliest period is, shall we say, elusive, like trying to find a perfectly preserved feather from a dodo, the logic of their daily lives suggests an undeniable, practical role in spatial understanding and communication. Historians still argue whether early abstract rock art might even represent primitive mapping concepts, with some theories suggesting they depicted hunting routes or seasonal migrations. Consider the map you might draw for a friend to find your house full of landmarks and turns. Imagine that on a grander scale, conveyed not with paper and pen, but with gestures, stories, and perhaps markings in the dirt or on a smoothed stone. The practical necessity of sharing this geographical knowledge would have been paramount for survival. You're sitting there, listening to a storyteller, her voice a low murmur, describing the path to the best fishing spot or the treacherous bog to avoid. She's not just telling a story, she's mapping a landscape in your mind, guiding your steps through the wilderness without ever setting foot outside the cave. This oral tradition of mapping, often led by women, was the bedrock upon which all future cartographic endeavors would be built. It's easy to overlook this foundational stage, to leap straight to grand nautical charts and globes. But the very first mapmakers weren't necessarily drawing straight lines or perfect circles. They were observing, remembering, and most importantly, communicating spatial information in ways that ensured the survival of their communities. Perhaps a woman, knowing the subtle shifts in river currents or the migration patterns of animals, would describe a path that seemed counterintuitive to the men who hunted, but which ultimately proved safer or more fruitful. Her knowledge, a blend of acute observation and accumulated wisdom, was a form of living cartography. It's like a human GPS, only powered by millennia of ancestral knowledge instead of satellites, and probably a lot less prone to telling you to turn left when you should go right. So, as we begin this quiet journey into the history of maps, let's remember that the origins are humble, communal, and profoundly human. They are not about grand expeditions yet, but about the fundamental need to know where to find food, where to find safety, where to find home. And in those very first unrecorded instances, women were undoubtedly charting the course. From the faint scratches on cave walls, our journey through the history of forgotten cartographers gently carries us eastward, along the Fertile Crescent, all the way to ancient Mesopotamia. Here, in the cradle of civilization, a truly revolutionary material emerged for recording information: clay. You can almost feel the cool, damp earth squishing between your fingers. Imagine the meticulous process of shaping it into a tablet, smoothing its surface, ready for the stylus. These weren't just for shopping lists, mind you. These were for laws, epic poems, and, crucially for us, maps. One of the most famous examples, though fragmented, is the Babylonian map of the world. Dating back to around 600 BCE now, when you picture a world map, you probably imagine something roughly spherical, with continents neatly outlined. The Babylonian version is, well, different. It's a circular tablet depicting Babylon at its center, surrounded by marshland, cities, and distant mountains. Beyond that, a saltwater ocean, and then wait for it, mythical distant regions or islands, perhaps home to fantastical creatures. It's less about geographical accuracy as we know it, and more about a cosmological worldview. Imagine trying to plan a vacation with this map. Right? So we aim for the place where the sun is not seen. Then it's just a quick hop past the home of the sacred cows. Good luck with that itinerary. This is where the story gets really interesting, especially for our quiet exploration of female contributions. While the prominent scribes and scholars who meticulously carved these tablets were overwhelmingly male, the act of recording information often relied on a broader societal knowledge base. Who collected the local legends, the tales of distant lands, the stories of routes taken by merchants and traders? Often it was the storytellers, the household managers, and the priestesses who held vast amounts of oral tradition and practical knowledge. In Mesopotamian society, women held significant legal and economic rights, and some were highly educated scribes. While we don't have a specific clay tablet with a signed Inhejuana cartographer extraordinaire inscription, it's not a wild leap to consider that female scribes involved in temple administration or royal households, would have handled records that implicitly contained geographical data. Think about inventories of goods traveling along trade routes, or property deeds detailing land boundaries. These aren't maps, but they are pieces of a geographical puzzle, meticulously recorded. Historians still argue whether the geometric precision seen in some cuneiform texts, which could have been applied to land surveys, implies a broader, perhaps uncredited, participation from a range of scribal hands, including women. Consider the meticulous detail required to track complex irrigation systems, essential for survival in this arid land. Who was managing the agricultural output, the distribution of water, the flow of goods? Women often played crucial roles in household economies and temple estates, which would necessitate a very keen understanding of land use and resource allocation. While not drawing maps in the modern sense, their administrative tasks inherently involved spatial thinking and record-keeping that edged very close to cartography. Imagine the head of a large estate, a woman perhaps, needing to know precisely where her fields were, where the canals ran, and how much grain was coming from each plot. She might not draw a map, but she'd certainly have a mental one, far more complex and detailed than many of her male counterparts. And perhaps she'd instruct a scribe on what details to include for her records. The notion of a map in ancient Mesopotamia wasn't purely geographical. It was also about the relationships between places, people, and the divine. The Babylonian map of the world, for instance, reflects a cosmology where the gods play a central role in shaping the world. This intertwining of the practical and the spiritual meant that knowledge about the world was not just about distances, but about divine blessings, mythical origins, and sacred journeys. And in a society where priestesses held immense influence and were often highly literate, their understanding and interpretation of these cosmologies could, subtly, yet profoundly, influence how the world was conceived and eventually depicted. It's like being asked to draw a map of your neighborhood, but also having to include where all the best gossip originates. Suddenly, your map gets a whole lot more interesting, and perhaps a lot more detailed in unexpected ways. So, as the stylus glides across the damp clay, creating the lines that defined their known world, remember the silent, uncredited contributions. The woman who remembered the precise location of a rare medicinal herb, the priestess who understood the sacred topography of their gods, the administrator who tracked the flow of goods across a vast estate. Their knowledge, though not always etched onto a clay tablet with a signature, was an invisible ink foundational to the maps that eventually emerged. They were the original data points, the human sensors gathering the raw information that someone else would later compile into a tangible form. As the echoes of cuneiform scribes fade, our quiet journey drifts west, along the life-giving Nile, into the heart of ancient Egypt. Here, the landscape itself was a map, dictated by the annual inundation of the river. You can almost feel the fine, fertile silt between your toes, hear the rhythmic creak of the shadoof lifting water, the lowing of cattle, and the distant, haunting call of a ibis. For the Egyptians, understanding their world was about understanding the river, its cycles, and the heavens above. And in this incredibly organized society, women played a far more public and recognized role in various aspects of knowledge, including those that bordered on cartography. Think about the sheer logistical genius required to manage a civilization so utterly dependent on the Nile. Every year, the floodwaters would recede, leaving behind a fresh layer of nutrient-rich soil, but also erasing boundary markers. This meant land had to be resurveyed constantly, while the harpodonopti, or rope stretchers, were the official male surveyors. The knowledge they relied upon wasn't solely their own. Who owned the land? Who inherited it? Who managed the household accounts that meticulously tracked agricultural yields? Often it was women. Egyptian women, unlike many of their counterparts in other ancient societies, enjoyed significant legal and economic independence. They could own property, inherit land, and manage businesses. This meant they needed a very precise understanding of their estates, their boundaries, and the productivity of their fields. You can imagine a noblewoman, perhaps, overseeing her vast holdings, with a mental map of every plot, every granary, every papyrus marsh. She might not draw it herself, but her practical, everyday knowledge of the land was a crucial component of the grand survey. Historians still argue whether the astronomical precision found in temple alignments and pyramids might also suggest uncredited female contributions, perhaps as observers or record keepers, given women's significant roles in temple administration. But the Egyptian connection to mapping extended beyond the earthly realm, straight into the heavens. The night sky was their ultimate celestial map, guiding their religious practices, agricultural cycles, and even their architecture. You're gazing up at the impossibly clear desert sky, picking out constellations, seeing patterns in the endless pinpricks of light. Who were the meticulous observers of these celestial movements? While male priests and astronomers were prominent, there's evidence suggesting that women played a vital, though often understated, role in astronomy and astrology. Priestesses, particularly those associated with deities like Hathor or Seshat, were highly educated and involved in temple rituals that often involved precise astronomical alignments. Think of the intricate star charts found on tomb ceilings or sarcophagi. These weren't just decorative. They were functional maps of the cosmos, designed to guide the deceased through the afterlife. It's plausible that women, through their roles in temples and as keepers of funerary traditions, contributed to the astronomical knowledge that informed these celestial maps. It's like being the head of the local astrology club, but instead of just predicting your love life, you're helping design a whole new way to bury pharaohs. Consider the intricate knowledge required to align massive stone structures, like the pyramids, with cardinal directions and specific stars. This wasn't guesswork. It was the result of generations of accumulated astronomical data and highly precise observation. While the architects were predominantly male, the continuous, long-term monitoring of the skies, often associated with religious practices, could very well have involved priestesses and other educated women. Their observations, meticulously recorded on papyrus or temple walls, would have been an invaluable resource for the grand architectural feats that defined ancient Egypt. It's like having a team of dedicated amateur astronomers. Only their observations literally shaped the landscape for millennia. Furthermore, daily life in Egypt was full of small acts of mapping. From the detailed inventories of goods transported along trade routes, often managed by women in merchant families, to the practical understanding of the layout of a bustling market, spatial awareness was key. Imagine a woman selling pottery, knowing precisely where each vendor was, the flow of customers, and the shortest route to the best clay supplier. Her mental map of the market was a dynamic, essential tool for her livelihood. These everyday maps might not be preserved in museums, but they were the invisible threads that wove together the fabric of Egyptian society. So, as we imagine the gentle flow of the Nile and the shimmering stars above the desert, let's acknowledge the silent yet significant contributions of Egyptian women. Whether managing vast estates, meticulously observing the night sky for religious or calendrical purposes, or simply navigating the complex social and economic landscapes of their daily lives, their understanding and application of spatial knowledge were foundational. They were, in their own quiet ways, charting the course of one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever known. Leaving the sun-drenched banks of the Nile, our gentle historical current now carries us across the sparkling waters of the Mediterranean, straight into the heart of ancient Greece. Here, mapping evolved from practical land surveys to something far more philosophical and conceptual. You're lounging in a stoa, perhaps, listening to philosophers debate the very shape of the earth, or gazing at a meticulously crafted globe, albeit one made of bronze, not spinning plastic. The Greeks were less about detailed road maps and more about grand theoretical cartography, often intertwined with astronomy and mathematics. Think of Anaximander, credited with creating one of the earliest known world maps around 6th century BCE, depicting a disc-shaped Earth surrounded by ocean, or Eratosthenes, who, centuries later, astonishingly calculated the Earth's circumference with remarkable accuracy using shadows and trigonometry. These were intellectual giants, primarily male, pondering the cosmos. But here's the quiet twist. The pursuit of knowledge in ancient Greece was not confined solely to the public forums of men. Women, particularly those in philosophical schools or wealthy households, could access education and participate in intellectual discourse, albeit often behind the scenes. One of the most compelling figures in this context is Hypatia of Alexandria, a brilliant Neoplatonist philosopher, astronomer, and mathematician who lived in the 4th and 5th centuries CE. While not primarily a cartographer, her work in astronomy and mathematics was absolutely foundational to the principles of mapmaking. You're imagining her in the great library of Alexandria, surrounded by scrolls, calculating celestial positions, or refining astronomical instruments. Her lectures drew students from far and wide, and she advised the city's prefect. Her expertise in geometry and the construction of astrolabes and hydrometers directly relates to the tools and calculations necessary for accurate mapping. Could she have, in her studies or teachings, contributed to or influenced the cartographic understanding of her time? It's not a stretch. If you can calculate the precise movements of celestial bodies, mapping the terrestrial realm seems like a rather straightforward application of those skills. Historians still argue whether her direct involvement in practical mapping projects is quantifiable, but her theoretical contributions are undeniable. It's like asking if a master chef who invents a new cooking technique ever actually made a casserole. Probably not. But his innovations certainly made better casseroles possible for everyone else. Beyond the towering intellects, consider the everyday lives of Greek women. While largely confined to the domestic sphere, this didn't mean they lacked geographical understanding. The management of large households, which often included agricultural plots or workshops, required an implicit spatial awareness. You're walking through a sprawling villa, noting the location of the olive press, the vineyard, the workshops where textiles are produced. This intimate knowledge of land use and resource location, while not formalized into a published map, was a vital, practical form of cartography. They knew the routes for collecting water, the paths to the market, and the best places to gather wild herbs. This kind of mental mapping was essential for the smooth functioning of their daily lives. Furthermore, Greek mythology, which deeply permeated daily life, was full of geographical references, often tied to voyages and distant lands. Women, as storytellers, caregivers, and participants in religious rituals, would have been deeply steeped in these narratives. These myths, while fictional, served as a kind of informal atlas, populating the known world with legendary sites and providing a framework for understanding foreign lands. It's like your grandmother telling you fantastical stories about the old country. But in doing so, she's also subtly teaching you its geography, the emphasis on philosophical exploration in Greek. Cartography also meant a greater focus on the oikoumene, the inhabited world, and its relationship to the cosmos. While men like Ptolemy would later create detailed world maps based on coordinates, the groundwork for this systematic approach was laid by centuries of theoretical inquiry. And in that intellectual melting pot, the quiet contributions of women, whether as scholars like Hypatia influencing mathematical principles, or as practical managers of domestic and agricultural spaces, cannot be entirely dismissed. They were, in their own spheres, contributing to the growing understanding of where things were, both on earth and in the heavens. Their legacy, though often uncredited, was a subtle but profound influence on the Greek quest to define and understand their place in the grand design of the world. Drifting from the philosophical debates of ancient Greece, our quiet current now takes us westward again into the pragmatic heart of the Roman Empire. Here, the art of mapping wasn't just about abstract ideas. It was about conquest, control, and connection. You're marching with a legion, feeling the steady rhythm of your boots on a meticulously paved road, looking at mile markers, and perhaps a legionary's rough sketch of the next day's march. The Romans were masters of practical application, and their maps reflected this. They were tools for governance, administration, and military expansion. The most famous example is the Tabula Peutingeria, a surviving medieval copy of an ancient Roman road map stretching over 22 feet long. It's less a geographical map and more a schematic diagram, like an ancient Google Maps with all the artistic flair of a really long receipt. It shows roads, distances, towns, and key landmarks, but distorted in a way that prioritizes routes over accurate scale. Imagine trying to drive using this map. You'd probably end up in Gaul when you meant to go to Hispania, though at least the roads would be excellent. So, where do women fit into this vast, organized empire of roads and measurements? While Roman society was patriarchal, women, particularly those of the elite classes, wielded considerable indirect power and managed vast estates. The logistics of running a large Roman villa, complete with its various agricultural plots, quarries, or workshops, required a profound understanding of property boundaries, resource allocation, and transportation routes. You can imagine a Roman matron, perhaps overseeing her sprawling vineyard, knowing precisely where each vine was planted, the best path to the nearest via, and the location of the most efficient water source. Her knowledge, though not formally drawn on a map for public display, was a crucial daily application of spatial understanding. Historians still argue whether the detailed census records, which often included land ownership and population figures, might have been influenced by the practical administrative insights of aristocratic Roman women, given their roles in managing household assets and dependents. Consider also the incredibly complex supply chains that fed the sprawling Roman army and its burgeoning cities. Grain from Egypt, olives from Hispania, wine from Gaul, all needed to be transported efficiently across a vast empire, while the legions themselves managed much of the military logistics. The civilian side of trade and provisioning often involved women. Women owned businesses, ran taverns, and managed market stalls. They understood the flow of goods, the reliable routes, and the potential bottlenecks. A merchant woman, for example, would have an intimate mental map of the port cities, the major trade routes, and the local distribution networks. This practical knowledge was essential for the empire's economic heartbeat. It's like being the CEO of a huge logistics company, only your spreadsheets are mental and your delivery vehicles are donkey carts. Furthermore, Roman engineering, renowned for its aqueducts and bridges, relied on precise surveying. While the engineers were male, the collection of local topographical information, understanding water sources, and knowing the lay of the land for agricultural purposes might have involved insights from local populations, including women who lived and worked on the land. They would know the subtle shifts in elevation, the reliable springs, and the areas prone to flooding. Knowledge that, when combined with Roman engineering prowess, resulted in magnificent structures. Even in the domestic sphere, mapping played a quiet role. Wealthy Roman women often commissioned elaborate garden designs, requiring detailed plans and a spatial understanding of how to arrange plants, fountains, and statues to create a harmonious whole. These might not have been geographical maps, but they were precise spatial designs, showcasing an understanding of scale and layout. It's like designing a miniature theme park, but instead of roller coasters, you're dealing with perfectly manicured hedges and serene, reflecting pools. So, as we reflect on the mighty Roman Empire and its impressive network of roads and structures, let's remember the often unseen hands and minds that contributed to its functioning. From the practical management of estates to the subtle influence on logistical knowledge and the intuitive understanding of local landscapes, Roman women, in their own spheres, their contributions, though not heralded on grand monuments, were as essential as the stones of the Via Appia itself. Leaving the practical, paved roads of the Roman Empire behind, our quiet journey now takes a turn into the mystical and often misunderstood era of the European Middle Ages. Here, maps weren't just about showing where you could march an army or trade goods. They were often about spiritual journeys, sacred sites, and a cosmic understanding of the world. You're stepping into a quiet scriptorium, perhaps, the scent of parchment and ink filling the air, watching a monastic hand meticulously illuminate a manuscript, not just with text, but with intricate diagrams of the world. During this period, many maps were less about geographical precision and more about theological understanding. The Mappa Mundi, literally map of the world, were popular, often circular, depicting Jerusalem at the center, surrounded by the known continents, with the Garden of Eden somewhere in the east. They were theological statements as much as geographical ones, designed to illustrate Christian dogma and biblical stories. Imagine trying to use one of these to plan a pilgrimage. You'd probably find yourself lost in a theological debate rather than a geographical one. It's like trying to navigate using a family tree only it's a family tree of saints and mythical creatures. Now, within the cloistered walls of monasteries and convents, where knowledge was preserved and disseminated, women played a profound, though often overlooked, role. While male monks dominated the creation of many large-scale mappa mundi, there were countless female scribes, illuminers, and abbesses who were highly literate and deeply involved in intellectual pursuits. One towering figure emerges in this context: Hildegard of Bingen, a German Benedictine abbess, mystic, composer, philosopher, and polymath of the 12th century. Hildegard was a visionary in every sense of the word. While she didn't draw geographical maps in the modern sense, her elaborate cosmological diagrams and visionary illustrations, found in works like Civias and Liber Divinorum Oprum, offer a profound mapping of the universe, the human soul, and divine order. You're watching her, perhaps in a trance, dictating her visions, which are then meticulously illustrated, depicting intricate relationships between celestial bodies, the elements, and humanity. Her work is a form of spiritual cartography, a detailed blueprint of creation itself. Historians still argue whether her detailed descriptions of natural phenomena, often integrated into her theological visions, indicate a more direct, albeit symbolic, understanding of physical landscapes than previously acknowledged for women of her era. Beyond these grand visionary works, consider the practical knowledge held within convents. These were often self-sufficient communities, managing their own lands, gardens, and resources. Abbesses and the nuns, under their charge, needed a precise understanding of their property boundaries, agricultural cycles, and the local topography. They would manage vineyards, herbal gardens, and supply chains for their communities. This required an implicit, practical form of mapping, knowing the best routes to local markets, the sources of clean water, and the most fertile plots of land. While not translating into published maps, this everyday spatial awareness was vital for their survival and prosperity. It's like running a small, self-sustaining village, where every plot of land and every footpath is part of a constantly updated mental atlas. Furthermore, within the broader medieval society, noble women managed vast estates and numerous servants. This required an astute sense of organization and a practical knowledge of the lands they administered. They would oversee the collection of rents, the management of agricultural produce, and the provisioning of their households, which often involved tracking goods transported across significant distances. These were informal, yet essential, forms of logistical mapping that kept the medieval world functioning. So, as we imagine the quiet cloisters and the fervent spiritual devotion of the Middle Ages, let's remember the women who, through their scholarship, visions, and practical management, contributed to the era's understanding of the world, both physical and divine. Their maps may not have shown coastlines and mountains in precise detail, but they charted internal landscapes, spiritual journeys, and the very fabric of their known universe. From the sacred diagrams of medieval Europe, our quiet journey now glides effortlessly across vast deserts and vibrant trade routes into the intellectual heart of the Islamic Golden Age. This was a period of unparalleled scientific advancement, where scholars, regardless of their gender, pursued knowledge with an almost insatiable curiosity. You're standing in a bustling library in Baghdad or Cordoba, surrounded by towering stacks of scrolls, the scent of parchment, ink, and exotic spices mingling in the air. Here, maps weren't just about faith or conquest. They were precise scientific instruments driven by a profound understanding of mathematics and astronomy. The Islamic world made enormous strides in cartography, inheriting knowledge from Greek and Roman traditions, but significantly expanding upon them. Figures like Muhammad al-Idrisi, whose 12th century world map, the Tabula Rogeriana, was remarkably accurate for its time, compiled information from extensive travels and existing knowledge. These maps often featured intricate details of trade routes, cities, and geographical features, far surpassing their European counterparts in precision. Imagine trying to plot a course across the Sahara and having a map that actually showed you where the oases were, instead of just mythical beasts. But who was contributing to this wealth of precise information? While the most celebrated geographers and astronomers were male, the pursuit of knowledge in the Islamic world often included women, particularly in the fields of medicine, education, and as patrons of scholarship. Think about the hidden figures of astronomy. The construction of accurate maps relied heavily on precise astronomical observations. Knowing the stars was knowing your position on Earth in Islamic society. Women were often educated, sometimes even establishing schools and libraries. It's plausible that within educated households, or as assistants to scholars, women participated in the painstaking process of observing celestial bodies, calculating positions, or copying scientific manuscripts. While direct evidence of female cartographers is scarce, the role of female astronomers is better documented. For instance, Mariam Alelia al-Sturlabi, a 10th century astrolabe maker from Aleppo, is a testament to women's involvement in highly technical scientific endeavors. An astrolabe, for those unfamiliar, was a sophisticated astronomical instrument used for navigation, timekeeping, and calculating celestial positions. Essentially, a portable astronomical map. You're imagining her meticulously crafting intricate brass gears and plates, each one a tiny universe of calculation. Her work directly contributed to the tools that enabled accurate mapping. Historians still argue whether the detailed geographical descriptions found in Arabic travelogues, which formed the basis for many maps, might have incorporated observations and local knowledge gathered from women travelers or local inhabitants encountered along the trade routes. Consider the bustling trade routes, the Silk Road stretching across Asia, and the spice routes crisscrossing the Indian Ocean. Merchants and travelers, many of them women, were constantly exchanging information about distant lands, customs, and, crucially, geography. While not formal mapmakers, their practical knowledge of routes, landmarks, and local conditions was invaluable raw data. A female merchant might have a mental map of every caravanserai, every mountain pass, and every safe watering hole from Damascus to Samarkand. Her knowledge, passed through oral traditions or private letters, contributed to the collective geographical understanding that eventually found its way onto official maps. It's like having the ultimate crowdsourced navigation app, only instead of digital pins, it's fueled by thousands of years of human travel and whispered directions. Furthermore, within the grand royal courts, where many of these scientific endeavors were funded, women often served as patrons of the arts and sciences. Their support could indirectly foster environments where cartographic and astronomical research flourished. A queen or a powerful noblewoman might commission a beautiful celestial globe or a detailed world map, thereby encouraging the very science that produced them. So, as we imagine the shimmering intellectual light of the Islamic Golden Age, let's acknowledge the contributions of women. Whether as renowned astrolabe makers like Maryam, as silent observers of the stars, or as practical purveyors of geographical knowledge through trade and daily life, their quiet influence helped chart not just the terrestrial world, but the very heavens above, leaving an indelible mark on the history of cartography. Leaving the intellectual brilliance of the Islamic Golden Age behind, our quiet journey now propels us into a period of dramatic global transformation, the age of exploration. Here, maps ceased to be primarily philosophical or theological statements and became instruments of immense power, guiding voyages of discovery, conquest, and unprecedented global exchange. You're standing on the deck of a creaking caravel, feeling the salt spray on your face, the vast, uncharted ocean stretching before you. The air hums with anticipation, fear, and the promise of unknown lands. This era, roughly from the 15th to the 17th centuries, saw an explosion in cartographic innovation. Figures like Gerard Mercator created projections that allowed navigators to plot straight courses, fundamentally changing maritime travel. These were grand, heroic voyages, often spearheaded by male explorers like Columbus, Magellan, and Vasco da Gama. But look closer, and you'll find that behind many of these expeditions, and even on board some of the ships, were women whose contributions to mapping, navigation, and geographical knowledge were vital, though consistently overlooked. Think of the wives, mothers, and daughters who ran the family businesses that funded these voyages. Many wealthy merchant families who invested heavily in maritime trade and exploration had women at their helm, especially when male relatives were at sea or had passed away. These women were managing complex ledgers, tracking cargo, and understanding the financial risks and geographical rewards of distant journeys. Their business acumen required a shrewd understanding of the world's emerging trade routes and the lands from which exotic goods originated. You can imagine a formidable matriarch, perhaps scrutinizing a ship's manifest, her mind a living atlas of ports and commodities. While not drawing maps, her practical knowledge of global geography was indispensable. Historians still argue whether the detailed logistical records kept by these merchant families, often overseen by women, directly influenced the accuracy and detail found in commercial charts of the era. Then there are the women who actually sailed. While rare, some women disguised themselves as men to join voyages, driven by a thirst for adventure or economic necessity. Others, like Jean Barrette, who sailed with Louis Antoine de Bougainville in the 18th century, disguised herself as a man to become a botanist's assistant, collecting thousands of plant specimens. Her detailed observations of the flora and fauna and the landscapes they encountered contributed directly to the geographical and scientific understanding of newly discovered lands. While not charting coastlines, her meticulous field notes were a form of biological mapping, adding crucial detail to the emerging picture of the world. It's like being a super-secret spy, only instead of espionage. Your mission is to collect rare orchids and document the local topography. Consider also the incredible role of indigenous women in the Americas, Africa, and Asia, who often served as guides, translators, and cultural intermediaries for European explorers. Without their intimate knowledge of local terrain, water sources, and safe passages, many expeditions would have been doomed. Think of figures like Sacagawea, who guided Lewis and Clark across vast, unknown territories. While not a European cartographer, her mental maps of the landscape, passed down through generations, were more accurate and detailed than any chart the explorers possessed. She was the living, breathing, walking, talking GPS that made their expedition possible. These women were crucial, not just as guides, but as sources of geographical intelligence that shaped the very maps Europeans would eventually draw. The maps of the age of exploration were often riddled with inaccuracies and blank spaces, filled with sea monsters and fanciful creatures in the unknown. But slowly, painstakingly, these blanks were filled in. And a significant part of that filling-in process came from the accumulation of practical knowledge. Much of it derived from the experiences and insights of women. Whether they were the savvy businesswomen back home, the adventurous few who went to sea, or the indispensable indigenous guides who revealed the secrets of their homelands. Their contributions, though often unsung, were threads in the vast tapestry of global discovery. As the sails of the age of exploration recede into the horizon, our quiet journey now brings us to a fascinating and often overlooked aspect of cartographic history: the deep connection between indigenous knowledge and what would become formal map-making. This isn't about grand European expeditions. It's about the incredible, sophisticated ways non-European cultures understood and represented their worlds, often through oral traditions and unique artistic expressions. You're sitting around a fire in a longhouse, perhaps, or beneath a sprawling acacia tree, listening intently as stories unfold, stories that are, in their very essence, maps. For countless millennia, long before Europeans arrived with their parchment and ink, indigenous peoples across the globe had developed incredibly precise and detailed methods of understanding and transmitting geographical information. These maps weren't always drawn on paper. They were woven into songs, carved into wood, drawn in the sand, or, most commonly, passed down through generations in rich oral traditions. And in many of these cultures, women were the primary custodians and transmitters of this vital geographical knowledge. Think about the songlines of Aboriginal Australians. These aren't just melodies. They are intricate, multi-layered maps of the landscape, detailing waterholes, sacred sites, food sources, and travel routes. You're listening to a woman sing, and as her voice rises and falls, she's literally painting a mental picture of the desert, guiding you through its ancient pathways. Women in Aboriginal societies are often the primary gatherers of food and medicine, traversing vast distances and developing an intimate knowledge of the land's bounty and its hidden dangers. This profound connection to the land is codified in their songs and stories, serving as a complex system of oral cartography. Historians still argue whether the detailed knowledge embedded in these oral maps, often managed by women, influenced early European understanding of the Australian interior, even if uncredited. Or consider the Inuit drum songs and carvings. The Inuit, navigating vast Arctic landscapes of ice and snow, possessed an extraordinary understanding of their environment. While men hunted and fished, women were often responsible for preparing furs, managing camps, and teaching children survival skills, all of which required precise spatial knowledge. Their traditional stories and songs often contained detailed geographical information about hunting grounds, safe routes across sea ice, and the location of crucial resources. Some Inuit even carved miniature wooden maps, called relief maps, that could be felt in the dark or carried under gloves. offering a tactile representation of coastlines and islands. You can imagine an elder woman, her hands weathered by the Arctic wind, tracing the contours of a carved map for a younger generation, teaching them the subtle nuances of the treacherous ice. It's like having a 3D printed topographical map in your pocket, only it's made from driftwood and passed down through generations. In many Native American cultures, women were involved in agricultural practices, knowing the fertile lands, the water sources, and the seasonal cycles of crops. They were also often the weavers and potters, creating intricate designs that sometimes incorporated symbolic representations of their landscape or cosmology. While not literal maps, these artistic expressions were imbued with spatial meaning and cultural knowledge. Imagine a woman weaving a basket, and the pattern she creates subtly echoes the winding river that nourishes her village. The very notion of mapping for these cultures often transcended mere physical location. It was deeply spiritual, interwoven with ancestry, creation myths, and the responsibilities humans had to the land. Women, often spiritual leaders, healers, and storytellers, were central to preserving and transmitting this holistic understanding of their world. Their wisdom, accumulated over countless generations, was a living, breathing atlas. So, as we listen to the ancient echoes of oral traditions, let's appreciate the immense, often uncredited, contributions of indigenous women, their intimate connection to the land, their sophisticated methods of conveying geographical knowledge, and their role as custodians of cultural memory provided forms of cartography that were profoundly effective and deeply meaningful. Long before paper maps became commonplace, they were, and continue to be, the true navigators of their ancestral lands. Moving forward from the oral traditions and intricate spiritual maps of indigenous cultures, our quiet journey now brings us back to Europe, specifically to the vibrant, transformative period of the Renaissance. This was an age when art and science weren't separate disciplines but intertwined expressions of human curiosity, and maps were no exception. You're stepping into a bustling workshop in Florence or Venice, the air thick with the smell of oils, pigments, and freshly cut wood. Here, maps weren't just practical tools, they were exquisite works of art, meticulously illuminated and richly adorned. The Renaissance saw a resurgence of interest in classical knowledge, coupled with unprecedented artistic and scientific innovation. Mapmakers, often artists themselves, began to integrate cartography with painting, engraving, and manuscript illumination. Atlas production boomed, with magnificent volumes filled with detailed, beautifully rendered maps. Figures like Abraham Ortelius, whose Theatrum Orbis Terrarum is considered the first true modern atlas, combined geographical information with elaborate decorative elements. Imagine flipping through such a book. It's less a map and more a portal to a meticulously imagined world, often featuring fantastical creatures, ships, and ornate cartouches. But where do women, often confined to the domestic sphere during this period, fit into this artistic and scientific explosion? While the most prominent mapmakers were men, the intricate process of creating these illuminated maps and atlases involved a vast network of skilled artisans, and many of these crafts were historically accessible to women. Think of the illuminators, miniaturists, and engravers who added the exquisite details to these maps. Women from artistic families often worked alongside their fathers, brothers, and husbands, learning highly specialized skills that were essential for the aesthetic appeal of these cartographic masterpieces. You can imagine a woman, perhaps, bent over a large map, her hand steady, meticulously painting in a tiny ship or a whimsical sea monster, adding the vibrant colors that brought the world to life. While their names might not appear on the grand title pages, their skilled hands were undeniably part of the creative process. Historians still argue whether the stylistic choices in some illuminated maps, particularly the intricate floral or figural borders, might reflect the uncredited contributions of female artists trained in miniature painting. Consider the role of nuns in convents during the Renaissance. While we touched on them in the Middle Ages, their artistic and scholarly activities continued to flourish. Many convents had scriptoria where manuscripts, including sometimes those with maps or scientific diagrams, were copied and illuminated. Nuns were often highly educated and skilled in various artistic techniques. Their work, though often intended for internal monastic use or for devotional purposes, preserved and transmitted knowledge, including geographical information that was part of broader encyclopedic works. It's like having a secret, highly skilled art studio, hidden behind convent walls, producing works of incredible beauty and precision. Furthermore, within wealthy noble households, women were often patrons of the arts and sciences. A duchess or a wealthy merchant's wife might commission a personalized atlas, a celestial globe, or even a detailed map of her family's estates. By commissioning these works, they were not just consumers. They were implicitly supporting the cartographic arts and shaping the demand for detailed and aesthetically pleasing maps. Their discerning eyes and financial backing played a quiet but significant role in the flourishing of Renaissance cartography. Even in the more practical realm of land ownership, women played a part. Widows and daughters often inherited and managed vast estates, requiring a clear understanding of property boundaries and agricultural land. While they might not have drawn the formal legal maps, their practical knowledge of their holdings was critical. A noblewoman supervising her vast properties would need to know every field, every forest, and every stream, essentially carrying a detailed mental map of her domain. So as we admire the artistic splendor of Renaissance maps, let's remember the silent contribution of women who, as skilled illuminators, uncredited engravers, dedicated scholars in convents, or discerning patrons, helped bring these magnificent visions of the world to life. Their quiet artistry added color, detail, and beauty to the emerging global picture, ensuring that these maps were not just tools, but enduring works of art. From the artistic flourish of the Renaissance, our quiet journey now shifts its focus to a different kind of mapmaking, one born from necessity and often shrouded in the complexities of cross-cultural encounters. We're talking about the era of European colonial expansion, particularly in the Americas, Africa, and Oceania, where the vast, uncharted territories posed immense challenges to European explorers. You're trekking through a dense rainforest, the air thick with humidity, every sound amplified, relying entirely on the knowledge of a local guide to navigate the labyrinthine paths. As Europeans pushed further into unfamiliar lands, their existing maps quickly proved inadequate. They were filled with blank spaces, or worse, wildly inaccurate representations based on rumor and speculation. The solution? They often relied heavily on the indigenous knowledge of the peoples already living there. And crucially, in many of these encounters, indigenous women played a foundational, though often uncredited role as guides, interpreters, and sources of vital geographical intelligence. Think of the famed expeditions across North America. While names like Lewis and Clark dominate the narrative, it was figures like Sacagawea, early 19th century, but a prime example of this enduring role, whose deep knowledge of the land, its resources, and its indigenous inhabitants made such journeys possible. You can imagine her, perhaps pointing out a hidden spring, identifying edible plants, or indicating the safest route through a treacherous mountain pass. Her mental map of the vast American West was far more detailed and accurate than any European chart of the time. She wasn't just a guide, she was a living, breathing atlas. Historians still argue whether the detailed maps eventually produced by the Lewis and Clark expedition accurately reflect the full extent of Sacagawea's geographical insights. Given the biases of the male chroniclers, beyond the well-known figures, consider the countless, unnamed, indigenous women who served as intermediaries between their communities and European newcomers. They facilitated trade, mediated disputes, and often shared knowledge of local resources and travel routes out of necessity or cultural exchange. A European trader, struggling to find a safe passage through a dense jungle, might rely entirely on the directions given by a local woman who knew every stream, every hill, and every shortcut in her territory. Her guidance, whether through gestures or translated words, was a direct contribution to the growing, albeit often stolen, geographical understanding of the colonizers. It's like having a hyperlocal tour guide who knows every secret alleyway and hidden gem. Only the stakes are far higher than finding the best coffee shop. In many indigenous societies, women were the primary gatherers of food and medicinal plants, which meant they possessed an intimate, detailed knowledge of the local ecology and topography. They knew where the best berries grew, where to find specific herbs for healing, and the seasonal changes in water sources. This detailed understanding of the landscape, gained through daily living and passed down through generations, was an invaluable, though often unacknowledged, source of cartographic information for the colonizers. They were the original environmental surveyors, long before that became a formalized profession. Even in situations of conflict, indigenous women often found themselves in pivotal positions, sometimes acting as negotiators or spies, requiring an acute awareness of military positions, escape routes, and the geography of power. Their understanding of the terrain was a strategic asset, even if it was rarely celebrated or recorded by the European chroniclers. So, as we reflect on the expansion of European empires and the creation of their global maps, let's remember the often unseen, yet absolutely crucial, contributions of indigenous women. Their deep, ancestral knowledge of the land, shared through guidance, interpretation, and everyday survival, provided the essential details that transformed blank spaces on European charts into mapped territories. Their silent wisdom helped chart a world that was, for them, already intimately known. From the complex cultural exchanges of the colonial era, our quiet journey now transitions into a period where science and precision took center stage. The Enlightenment. This was an age characterized by reason, observation, and systematic inquiry. And map-making was transformed from an art into a rigorous scientific discipline. You're looking through a brass telescope, perhaps, on a clear night, meticulously recording stellar positions, or meticulously measuring angles with a gleaming new surveying instrument in a freshly cleared field. The air hums with the excitement of discovery, driven by empirical data. The Enlightenment saw the rise of large-scale national mapping projects, often funded by governments eager to consolidate power, improve infrastructure, and understand their natural resources. Figures like the Cassini family in France meticulously surveyed and produced the first topographic map of an entire country. These were monumental undertakings, involving vast teams of surveyors, mathematicians, and astronomers, primarily male. But even within this highly formalized scientific pursuit, women played quiet, yet crucial roles, often as uncredited assistants, observers, or as integral parts of scientific households. Think about the astronomers, whose precise measurements of longitude and latitude were absolutely vital for accurate global mapping. While the named astronomers were usually men, many had wives, sisters, or daughters who served as their invaluable assistants, calculators, and observers. You can imagine a woman, perhaps, sitting beside her astronomer husband late into the night, recording observations, meticulously calculating complex equations, or even grinding lenses for telescopes. Their work was often painstaking and repetitive, requiring immense precision and dedication. For instance, Caroline Herschel, sister to the famous astronomer William Herschel, was an accomplished astronomer in her own right, discovering comets and nebulae and meticulously cataloging celestial objects. Her work, though eventually recognized, often involved the tedious calculations that underpinned astronomical mapping. While she became known, countless other women performed similar, uncredited labor in scientific households. Historians still argue whether the perceived speed of scientific advancement during this period might be partly attributed to the widespread, yet unacknowledged, computational labor provided by women in scientific families. Consider also the burgeoning field of natural history and botany, which often went hand in hand with exploration and mapping. As new lands were charted, so too were their flora and fauna. Women, particularly from educated or aristocratic backgrounds, often had a keen interest in botany and were skilled in illustration. They would collect specimens, meticulously record their characteristics, and create detailed botanical drawings that served as a visual form of biological mapping. These illustrations provided crucial information about the geographical distribution of species and the natural resources of newly explored territories. It's like being a forensic artist, but instead of sketching a suspect, you're perfectly rendering every leaf and petal of a newly discovered plant. Furthermore, wealthy women continued to be patrons of the sciences. A discerning lady of a salon might host scientific discussions, commissioning globes, astronomical instruments, or detailed estate maps. Their financial support and intellectual curiosity helped to foster an environment where cartographic innovation could thrive. Even in the domestic sphere, the principles of scientific mapping could be subtly applied. The management of large gardens or agricultural estates often required an understanding of spatial relationships, soil types, and water flow, which women, as managers of these domains, intuitively grasped. They were, in their own way, applying the principles of environmental mapping on a smaller, but no less significant, scale. So, as we imagine the Enlightenment's pursuit of rational knowledge and the meticulous mapping of the world, let's remember the quiet dedication of the women who, whether as uncredited astronomical assistants, talented botanical illustrators, or discerning patrons of science, contributed to this grand endeavor. Their precision and intellectual curiosity helped to refine the very fabric of geographical understanding. Leaving the grand scientific surveys of the Enlightenment, our quiet journey now brings us to a more intimate, yet equally vital, aspect of cartographic history: the family business of printing maps. This was a period when maps transitioned from being unique, hand-drawn artifacts to mass-produced items, making them accessible to a wider public. You're walking into a bustling print shop, perhaps in Amsterdam or London. The rhythmic thump-thump of the presses filling the air, the faint scent of ink and damp paper all around you. Here, the production of maps was often a family affair, and the uncredited work of women was absolutely essential. Think about the great map printing dynasties of the 17th and 18th centuries. Families like the Blaius or the Hondiuses, these weren't just individual master craftsmen. They were sprawling enterprises, often spanning generations, involving numerous skilled hands. While the patriarchs might have been the celebrated names, the intricate process of engraving the copper plates, coloring the printed maps, and managing the business operations often fell to female family members. You can imagine a daughter, perhaps, with incredibly steady hands, meticulously coloring in the details of a newly printed map with fine brushes and vibrant pigments. This wasn't just simple coloring. It required an eye for detail, an understanding of geographical conventions, and immense patience. This skilled labor, often done by women and children within the family home or workshop, was crucial for the final product's appeal and accuracy. Historians still argue whether the consistent quality of coloring and illumination across vast numbers of printed maps might indicate a formalized system of training and supervision among these uncredited female artisans within printing workshops. Beyond the artistic finishing touches, consider the sheer business acumen required to run a successful map publishing house. Women, particularly wives and widows, often managed the financial aspects, the inventory, and the distribution networks. When a master, engraver, or publisher passed away, it was frequently his widow who stepped in to continue the business, ensuring its continuity and often overseeing the completion of massive projects. These women were not just keeping the lights on. They were making critical decisions about production, sales, and even the content of future editions. Their practical knowledge of supply chains, market demand, and the overall business landscape was a form of metamapping, understanding the geography of commerce. It's like being the CFO of a major publishing house, but also having to make sure all the ink pots are full and the apprentices aren't napping. Furthermore, within these family enterprises, knowledge and skills were passed down informally from generation to generation. Daughters would learn engraving techniques, the art of coloring, and the nuances of business management simply by growing up in the workshop environment. This hands-on training meant that a significant portion of the workforce, though unlisted on any formal roster, comprised skilled female artisans contributing directly to the map-making process. Even the process of copying and correcting maps, a painstaking and essential task for accuracy, often involved meticulous handwork. Imagine a woman comparing newly received geographical data with existing plates, carefully noting discrepancies, or overseeing the manual corrections that were made to ensure the latest information was included. This attention to detail was vital for the reliability of the maps being produced. So, as we consider the proliferation of printed maps during this era, let's remember the quiet, yet indispensable, contributions of the women within these map-making families. Their precise coloring, their astute business management, and their uncredited skilled labor were the bedrock upon which the great map publishing houses were built, helping to bring the world piece by colorful piece into homes and libraries across the globe. Shifting our gaze from the bustling print shops and their family enterprises, our quiet journey now takes us into a more private, yet equally insightful realm of cartography, the creation of personal atlases and specialized maps by women for their own pursuits. This isn't about grand exploration or commercial ventures. It's about the quiet passion for knowledge, the meticulous observation of the natural world, and the desire to organize information in a visually compelling way. You're sitting in a quiet study, perhaps a gentle light falling upon a desk, watching a woman carefully press a delicate fern into a book, or meticulously sketch the layout of a botanical garden. During the 18th and 19th centuries, as education for women slowly expanded, and as the leisure class grew, many women engaged in scientific and artistic hobbies that, while not always formally recognized, were deeply intertwined with cartographic principles. Think of the surge in popularity of botany and natural history among educated women. Collecting, classifying, and illustrating plants required a keen sense of observation and an understanding of geographical distribution. Women would create elaborate herbaria collections of pressed plants, which often included detailed notes on where and when each specimen was found, effectively creating a botanical map of their local environment or even more distant travels. You can imagine a woman, a keen amateur botanist, meticulously drawing a wild orchid, noting its precise location on a hand-drawn sketch of her walking route. This was a direct, personal form of environmental mapping. Historians still argue whether the detailed amateur observations made by these women, often on their estates or during their travels, contributed to the broader scientific understanding of regional flora and fauna, even if their findings weren't published in academic journals. Beyond botanical studies, many women created estate maps or garden plans for their own properties. These weren't necessarily for public display or sale, but served practical purposes, managing agricultural plots, planning new garden layouts, or simply documenting the family's holdings. These personal maps, often beautifully drawn and detailed, showcased a precise spatial understanding and a meticulous attention to detail. It's like being your own personal landscape architect. Only your blueprints are exquisite, hand-drawn works of art intended solely for your own use. Consider also the phenomenon of cabinets of curiosities or wonder rooms that wealthy women often assembled. These collections of natural specimens, artifacts, and artworks from around the world required an implicit geographical understanding to categorize and display. While not maps themselves, the very act of organizing these global collections fostered a mental mapping of the world's diverse regions and their unique offerings. It's like curating your own personal museum of global wonders, where every object tells a story of its origin. Furthermore, women in their roles as travelers and diarists often recorded detailed observations of the landscapes, cities, and cultures they encountered. While their travelogues might not have included formal maps, their vivid descriptions of routes, landmarks, and geographical features provided rich qualitative data that could inform future cartographic endeavors. Their personal narratives offered their perspective that official maps sometimes lacked. So, as we imagine the quiet pursuits within private studies and drawing rooms, let's appreciate the subtle yet significant cartographic contributions of women through their personal atlases and specialized maps, whether meticulously documenting the natural world, planning their estates, or simply organizing their global curiosities. Their individual passions for knowledge added intricate layers to the collective understanding of our world, often with an artistic flair that was uniquely their own. Moving from the genteel pursuits of personal mapping, our quiet journey now takes a dramatic turn, plunging into the shadowy, often dangerous world of war efforts and clandestine mapping. Here, maps weren't just tools for navigation or commerce. They were instruments of strategy, intelligence, and survival, and women, often in unacknowledged roles, played crucial parts in their creation and dissemination. You're huddled in a dimly lit room, the rustle of paper and the hushed whispers, the only sounds, as you meticulously trace enemy positions onto a map, knowing that lives depend on your precision. Throughout history, in times of conflict, the need for accurate geographical intelligence has been paramount. While male soldiers and intelligence officers were the obvious figures on the front lines, women consistently contributed to the creation and utilization of military maps, often in roles that required exceptional discretion and courage. Often produced in large quantities and under immense pressure, needed to be hand-colored to differentiate between territories, troop movements, and strategic objectives. This painstaking work, requiring extreme precision and attention to detail, was frequently carried out by women. They were often working in hidden back rooms or at home, silently transforming monochrome outlines into vital, color-coded intelligence. Imagine a woman, her fingers stained with green and red inks, carefully filling in the lines that represented battlefronts or supply routes, knowing that a single mistake could have dire consequences. Organized labor of these uncredited female teams. Beyond the workshops, consider the role of spies and intelligence gatherers. While often romanticized, espionage relies heavily on geographical understanding. Women, often moving through society in ways that men could not, could gather information about troop deployments, fortifications, and supply lines. This information, whether conveyed orally or through coded messages, effectively contributed to the mental maps of military strategists guiding their decisions. A seemingly innocent conversation at a social gathering might yield crucial geographical intelligence, and it was often women who possessed the social skills and keen observation to extract it. It's like being a walking, talking reconnaissance drone, but instead of worry propellers, you're equipped with a charming smile and an observant eye. During the world wars of the 20th century, women's roles in clandestine mapping became even more formalized. In Britain, for example, the Auxiliary Territorial Service had women involved in cartographic units, plotting aerial photographs and creating detailed maps for military operations. In France, women worked in the resistance, often acting as couriers for intelligence, including maps and strategic documents, relying on their intimate knowledge of local terrain to evade capture. You're slipping through darkened streets, a rolled-up map hidden beneath your coat, your heart pounding, knowing that the information you carry could change the tide of battle. Even the creation of escape and evasion maps for downed pilots or agents behind enemy lines sometimes involved the intricate, secret work of women. These maps, often printed on silk or disguised as everyday objects, required immense precision and discretion in their production. The anonymous women who meticulously crafted these life-saving tools operated under the highest secrecy, their contributions critical but entirely uncredited. So, as we reflect on the intense pressures of wartime and the hidden networks of intelligence, let's remember the quiet bravery and meticulous skill of the women who contributed to clandestine mapping. Whether coloring strategic battle plans, gathering vital intelligence, or creating secret escape routes, their uncelebrated work was often the difference between victory and defeat, freedom and capture. Their silent contribution to shaping the unseen geography of conflict is a testament to their invaluable role, steering away from the clandestine maps of wartime. Our quiet journey now takes a fascinating detour to the frigid, inhospitable landscapes of the Arctic and Antarctic. Here, survival depended not just on courage, but on an unparalleled understanding of ice, snow, and the subtle shifts of an unforgiving environment. You're bracing against a biting wind, your breath fogging in the sub-zero air, as you watch an indigenous guide effortlessly navigate across a frozen expanse, where every landmark looks the same to an untrained eye. The great European and American polar expeditions of the 19th and early 20th centuries are often recounted as tales of male heroism and endurance. Explorers like Shackleton and Peary battled the elements, aiming to chart these last blank spaces on the world map. However, their successes often hinged critically on the knowledge, skills, and mental maps of indigenous peoples, particularly the Inuit in the Arctic. And within Inuit communities, women held vast practical knowledge of the land, snow, and ice conditions, which was absolutely vital for survival and navigation. Think about the Inuit women's profound understanding of the landscape. While men were often the hunters, women were the primary custodians of the domestic sphere and the invaluable knowledge of foraging, shelter, building, and survival techniques in extreme cold. They knew the precise location of reliable hunting grounds, safe ice crossings, and the availability of crucial resources like fresh water under the snow. Their mental maps weren't just about geographical features. They were about dynamic, ever-changing environmental conditions. You can imagine an elder woman, perhaps, teaching a young European explorer how to read the subtle nuances of the snow for potential hazards, or how to identify the best ice for igloo construction. This knowledge, gained over generations, was a form of sophisticated, practical cartography. Historians still argue whether the detailed knowledge of ice movements and sea conditions shared by Inuit women, often through their daily activities and oral traditions, was sufficiently incorporated into the formal maps produced by polar expeditions. Consider the construction of igloos, a remarkable feat of snow architecture. While men often built them, the detailed understanding of snow quality, wind patterns, and structural integrity often came from shared communal knowledge, which women contributed to through their observations and experiences in camp management. An igloo isn't just a shelter. It's a precisely engineered structure, and its optimal placement is a subtle act of mapping the local environment. It's like being an architect, but your building material is entirely dependent on the whims of the wind and the precise temperature of the snow. Furthermore, Inuit women played a crucial role in preparing and repairing clothing and gear, which was essential for surviving the brutal cold. Their knowledge of materials and sewing techniques was literally life-saving. While not directly map-making, their contributions allowed the male explorers to survive long enough to do their charting. Without their expertise, the expeditions would have failed long before any new lines could be drawn on a map. Even the simple act of child rearing in the Arctic instilled a deep geographical understanding. Children learned from a very young age to read the snow, the wind, and the subtle changes in light, all of which are essential for navigating a seemingly featureless white expanse. Women, as primary caregivers and educators, transmitted this vital spatial literacy to the next generation, ensuring the continuity of invaluable traditional knowledge. So, as we reflect on the epic struggles to conquer the poles and fill in the last white spaces on our world maps, let's remember the quiet yet profound contributions of Inuit women. Their intimate knowledge of the land and ice passed down through generations, and their practical skills in survival were the unwritten, invaluable maps that guided countless expeditions and ensured human endurance in the most extreme environments on Earth. From the icy expanses of the polar regions, our quiet journey now brings us to a surprisingly vibrant and impactful arena for women and maps: the suffragette movement and the broader efforts for social reform. Here, maps weren't about charting new lands or military strategy. They were about exposing inequalities, advocating for change, and visually representing social justice. You're sitting in a bustling meeting hall, the air electric with passionate speeches, looking at charts and diagrams that lay bare the injustices of the day, making abstract problems vividly clear. The late 19th and early 20th centuries saw the rise of modern social science, and with it, the innovative use of maps to illustrate societal problems and advocate for reform. While male academics and social reformers were prominent, women played a crucial role in collecting data, conducting surveys, and creating what we now call thematic maps. Maps that show statistical data like poverty rates, disease outbreaks, or, in our case, voter distribution. Think about the suffragette movement, campaigning tirelessly for women's right to vote. While they organized marches and delivered powerful speeches, they also used visual aids to make their case. Women, often highly educated but barred from many professions, found outlets for their intellect in social work and activism. They would meticulously collect data on voter demographics, polling booth locations, and the geographical spread of support for women's suffrage. You can imagine a determined suffragette, perhaps, creating a map of a city, shading areas red where women couldn't vote and green where they could, making the argument for universal suffrage visually undeniable. This was a powerful form of political mapping, turning abstract legal concepts into tangible geographical realities. Historians still argue whether the visual impact of these early social reform maps, often meticulously crafted by female activists, had a greater influence on public opinion than traditional written arguments. Beyond suffrage, women were deeply involved in a wide range of social reform movements, from temperance to public health initiatives. In the realm of public health, for instance, women were often on the front lines, working in crowded urban areas, collecting data on sanitation, disease prevalence, and access to clean water. Their detailed surveys and observations often informed the creation of public health maps that highlighted areas of concern, leading to crucial interventions. Imagine a social worker meticulously plotting cases of cholera on a neighborhood map, identifying the source of an outbreak and saving countless lives through her geographical insights. It's like being a medical detective, but your clues are pinpricks on a map, and your reward is a healthier community. Furthermore, women were key figures in early sociological studies, often conducting interviews and collecting demographic data in marginalized communities. Their understanding of spatial patterns, where different ethnic groups lived, where poverty was concentrated, or where services were lacking, contributed to a nascent form of urban planning and social geography. These maps, though often rudimentary by modern standards, provided critical visual arguments for policy changes and resource allocation, even within academic institutions. As universities slowly opened their doors to women, female scholars began to contribute to geographical research, though often facing significant barriers to publication and recognition. Their quiet, meticulous work in data collection and analysis laid foundational groundwork for future advancements in human geography. So, as we reflect on the powerful movements for social change in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, let's remember the often heralded contributions of women in using maps as tools for justice. Whether campaigning for the vote, improving public health, or advocating for urban reform, their innovative use of geographical data transformed abstract social problems into vivid, undeniable realities, charting a path toward a more equitable world. Moving onward from the social reform maps of the early 20th century, our quiet journey now ascends into the skies, entering an entirely new dimension of cartography, the age of aerial views and early photography. Here, maps were no longer just drawn from ground-level observations. They were captured from above, offering unprecedented perspectives and revealing hidden details of the landscape. You're soaring gently over vast stretches of land, the world unfolding beneath you like an enormous, intricate tapestry, a camera clutched in your hand, capturing the very fabric of the earth from a bird's-eye view. The advent of flight in the early 20th century revolutionized mapmaking. Suddenly, areas previously inaccessible or difficult to survey could be photographed from above, providing a level of detail and accuracy previously unimaginable. Aerial photography became an invaluable tool for everything from urban planning to military reconnaissance. While the early aviators were predominantly male, women, ever keen to push boundaries and contribute to new scientific fields, quickly found their place in this burgeoning technology, often contributing to the very images that would form the basis of new maps. Think of the intrepid female aviators and photographers who, despite immense societal barriers, took to the skies. While often celebrated for their daring flights, many were also keenly interested in the practical applications of aviation, including aerial photography. Figures like Jacqueline Cochran, a pioneering American aviator, while not primarily a cartographer, understood the importance of aerial reconnaissance and photography during World War II. Though women weren't combat pilots, many served in auxiliary roles that involved flying observation missions or training pilots, indirectly contributing to the geographical intelligence gathered from the air. You can imagine a woman perhaps soaring above a landscape, the roar of the engine filling her ears, her keen eyes spotting features that would be impossible to see from the ground, snapping photographs that would later be stitched together to create detailed aerial maps. Historians still argue whether the early commercial applications of aerial photography, particularly in real estate or agriculture, might have been influenced by women's early adoption and advocacy for this technology. Beyond the pilots themselves, consider the painstaking work involved in processing and interpreting aerial photographs. These weren't just snapshots. They were raw data that needed to be analyzed, rectified, and translated into usable map information. Women, often employed in roles that required meticulous attention to detail and patience, were crucial in this process. They would spend hours in dimly lit rooms, meticulously examining stereoscopic images to identify terrain features, enemy installations, or changes in urban landscapes. This work was a highly specialized form of visual cartography, transforming flat images into three-dimensional understanding. It's like being a detective, but your clues are shadows and subtle variations in texture on a photographic print, and your goal is to reconstruct the world below. Furthermore, as urban planning became a more formalized discipline, aerial photography provided essential data for understanding city growth, traffic patterns, and land use. Women, increasingly entering professions like urban planning and architecture, would utilize these aerial maps to design more efficient and equitable urban environments. Their spatial understanding was now augmented by this powerful new visual tool. Even in the more artistic realm, women photographers experimented with aerial perspectives, creating abstract and beautiful images of the landscape that, while not strictly utilitarian maps, fostered a new way of seeing and understanding the earth from above. These artistic endeavors subtly contributed to the broader cultural acceptance and appreciation of aerial views. So, as we reflect on the breathtaking shift in perspective that aerial photography brought to mapmaking, let's remember the quiet contributions of women who, whether as intrepid aviators, meticulous photos, interpreters, or pioneering urban planners, helped to literally lift cartography to new heights. Their efforts allowed us to see and understand our world in ways previously unimaginable, charting the invisible contours of the earth from the sky. Descending from the aerial perspectives of early photography, our quiet journey now brings us into the most recent chapters of cartographic history, the digital age, and the rise of geographic information systems, or GPS. This is a world where maps are no longer static images on paper, but dynamic, interactive layers of information, capable of revealing patterns and insights with unprecedented speed and complexity. You're sitting in front of a glowing screen, perhaps, manipulating vast datasets with a flick of your wrist, overlaying satellite imagery with demographic statistics, and charting patterns that were once invisible. The transition from analog to digital mapping has been one of the most profound revolutions in cartography. GIS, in essence, is a powerful framework for gathering, managing, and analyzing geographical data. It allows us to combine layers of information, from population density to soil types, from traffic flow to earthquake fault lines, and visualize them spatially. This has transformed countless fields, from environmental science to urban planning, disaster management to public health. And within this rapidly evolving field, women have played, and continue to play, an increasingly prominent role, often at the cutting edge of innovation. While the early days of computing and spatial analysis were male-dominated, the accessibility of GIS software and the interdisciplinary nature of the field have opened doors for women to contribute significantly. Think of the data scientists and GIS analysts who are meticulously collecting, cleaning, and processing the vast amounts of geographical information that fuel our modern maps. You can imagine a woman perhaps debugging a complex algorithm to correct satellite imagery, or designing a sophisticated database to track global climate change patterns. Their work is often invisible to the end user, but it is the bedrock upon which all digital maps are built. Historians still argue whether the collaborative, problem-solving nature of modern GIS development might have facilitated a more rapid integration and recognition of female expertise compared to earlier, more hierarchical cartographic fields. Consider the role of urban planners and environmental scientists who rely heavily on GIS to make informed decisions about sustainable development, resource management, and climate adaptation. Many women in these fields are pioneering new applications of GIS, using spatial analysis to address critical global challenges. They might be mapping flood risks in coastal communities, identifying optimal locations for renewable energy sources, or analyzing the geographical spread of social inequalities. Their work is literally shaping the future of our planet, one geolocated data point at a time. It's like being a global strategist, but your chessboard is a digital map of the entire world, and your pieces are layers of complex data. Furthermore, the rise of citizen science and crowdsourced mapping has created new avenues for women to contribute. Platforms like OpenStreetMap allow anyone to contribute geographical data, from mapping local footpaths to detailing disaster zones. Women, often at the forefront of community organizing and social initiatives, are actively participating in these efforts, contributing their local knowledge and helping to create more inclusive and detailed maps of their communities. This democratized approach to mapping empowers individuals, irrespective of formal training, to become active cartographers, even in the more creative aspects of digital mapping, such as data visualization and user interface design. Women are bringing fresh perspectives, making complex geographical information more accessible and intuitive for a wider audience. Their ability to translate raw data into compelling visual narratives is crucial for effective communication in our data-driven world. So, as we explore the dynamic, interconnected world of modern digital mapping, let's acknowledge the vital and growing contributions of women, whether as meticulous data scientists, innovative environmental planners, active citizen mappers, or creative visualization experts. Their expertise is fundamentally shaping how we understand and interact with our world in the 21st century, bringing our quiet historical journey to its serene conclusion. We arrive at the frontier of mapping the future. What does the horizon hold for cartography, and how will women continue to shape this ever-evolving field? You're gazing into a shimmering, holographic display, perhaps, where entire cities materialize before your eyes, or intricate environmental models shift and flow with breathtaking realism. The future of mapping isn't just about static representations. It's about dynamic, intelligent, and deeply interconnected visualizations of our world. As we look ahead, the fields of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and advanced data analytics are poised to revolutionize how we create and interact with maps. Imagine AI algorithms analyzing vast streams of satellite imagery and sensor data, instantly updating maps with real-time information about everything from traffic congestion to forest fires, climate change impacts to the spread of disease. Women are increasingly at the forefront of these technological advancements, working as AI researchers, data scientists, and software engineers, building the very tools that will define the next generation of cartography. Their analytical prowess and problem-solving skills are crucial for navigating the complexities of big spatial data. Historians still argue whether the increasing emphasis on collaborative, interdisciplinary teams in cutting-edge geospatial technology will lead to a more equitable and visible recognition of women's contributions compared to past eras. Consider the burgeoning field of immersive and augmented reality mapping. Soon, you might walk through a city with an AR overlay showing you historical buildings, real-time public transport information, or even personalized navigation directions floating in your line of sight. Women are key designers and developers in these areas, crafting intuitive user experiences and ensuring that these new mapping technologies are accessible and beneficial to diverse populations. Their creativity and understanding of human-computer interaction are essential for bridging the gap between abstract data and compelling, useful spatial experiences. It's like being a digital magician, conjuring entire worlds and layers of information into existence right before your eyes. Furthermore, the focus on sustainable development and global challenges will increasingly rely on sophisticated mapping, from tracking biodiversity loss to planning resilient cities, from managing humanitarian crises to monitoring food security. Geospatial intelligence is indispensable. Women, often deeply committed to social and environmental justice, are applying their cartographic skills to address these pressing issues, using maps to advocate for change and drive policy. They are charting the path towards a more sustainable and equitable future for all. It's like being a strategic general, but instead of planning battles, you're planning for the survival and well-being of entire communities using the most advanced mapping tools available. The democratization of mapping through open-source initiatives and accessible tools means that more people than ever, regardless of their formal background, can contribute. Women, with their strong community ties and often overlooked local knowledge, are poised to continue playing a vital role in crowdsourcing accurate and diverse geographical information, filling in the blanks that traditional mapping might miss. So, as we cast our gaze towards the future of maps, remember that it's a future being built by diverse hands and minds. From the quiet work of data scientists to the imaginative designs of AR/VR developers, from the passionate advocacy of environmental mappers to the everyday contributions of citizen scientists, women are continuing their long, rich, and often unsung legacy in cartography. They are not just mapping the world as it is, but actively shaping the maps of the world as it will be, one precise, insightful, and quietly profound contribution at a time. Now, as our journey through the unseen stories of female cartographers gently comes to a close, feel your muscles soften, your breath deepen. The ancient world, the bustling print shops, the icy poles, and the glowing digital screens all now merge into a peaceful, swirling tapestry in your mind. The intricate details of maps, the quiet whispers of knowledge, and the enduring human need to understand where can now drift into your dreams. Let the images fade, the facts settle, and the gentle rhythm of this history lull you further into slumber. There's nothing left to do but simply be. Sweet dream. Bringing our quiet historical journey to its serene conclusion, we arrive at the frontier of mapping the future. What does the horizon hold for cartography, and how will women continue to shape this ever-evolving field? You're gazing into a shimmering, holographic display, perhaps, where entire cities materialize before your eyes, or intricate environmental models shift and flow with breathtaking realism. The future of mapping isn't just about static representations, it's about dynamic, intelligent, and deeply interconnected visualizations of our world. As we look ahead, the fields of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and advanced data analytics are poised to revolutionize how we create and interact with maps. Imagine AI algorithms analyzing vast streams of satellite imagery and sensor data, instantly updating maps with real-time information about everything from traffic congestion to forest fires, climate change impacts to the spread of disease. Women are increasingly at the forefront of these technological advancements, working as AI researchers, data scientists, and software engineers, building the very tools that will define the next generation of cartography. Their analytical prowess and problem-solving skills are crucial for navigating the complexities of big spatial data. Historians still argue whether the increasing emphasis on collaborative interdisciplinary teams in cutting-edge geospatial technology will lead to a more equitable and visible recognition of women's contributions compared to past eras. Consider the burgeoning field of immersive and augmented reality mapping. Soon, you might walk through a city with an AR overlay showing you historical buildings, real-time public transport information, or even personalized navigation directions floating in your line of sight. Women are key designers and developers in these areas, crafting intuitive user experiences and ensuring that these new mapping technologies are accessible and beneficial to diverse populations. Their creativity and understanding of human-computer interaction are essential for bridging the gap between abstract data and compelling, useful spatial experiences. It's like being a digital magician, conjuring entire worlds and layers of information into existence right before your eyes. Furthermore, the focus on sustainable development and global challenges will increasingly rely on sophisticated mapping, from tracking biodiversity loss to planning resilient cities, from managing humanitarian crises to monitoring food security. Geospatial intelligence is indispensable. Women, often deeply committed to social and environmental justice, are applying their cartographic skills to address these pressing issues, using maps to advocate for change and drive policy. They are charting the path towards a more sustainable and equitable future for all. It's like being a strategic general, but instead of planning battles, you're planning for the survival and well-being of entire communities using the most advanced mapping tools available. The democratization of mapping through open-source initiatives and accessible tools means that more people than ever, regardless of their formal background, can contribute. Women, with their strong community ties and often overlooked local knowledge, are poised to continue playing a vital role in crowdsourcing accurate and diverse geographical information, filling in the blanks that traditional mapping might miss. So, as we cast our gaze towards the future of maps, remember that it's a future being built by diverse hands and minds. From the quiet work of data scientists to the imaginative designs of AR/VR developers, from the passionate advocacy of environmental mappers to the everyday contributions of citizen scientists, women are continuing their long, rich, and often unsung legacy in cartography. They are not just mapping the world as it is, but actively shaping the maps of the world as it will be, one precise, insightful, and quietly profound contribution at a time. Now, as our journey through the unseen stories of female cartographers gently comes to a close, feel your muscles soften, your breath deepen. The ancient world, the bustling print shops, the icy poles, and the glowing digital screens all now merge into a peaceful, swirling tapestry in your mind. The intricate details of maps, the quiet whispers of knowledge, and the enduring human need to understand where can now drift into your dreams. Let the images fade, the facts settle, and the gentle rhythm of this history lull you further into slumber. There's nothing left to do but simply be. Sweet dream.